Hallo und herzlich willkommen zurück zu einer weiteren Folge Witch on the Holy Night. Wir nähern uns ja weiter dem großen Finale. Sojo ist jetzt aufgebrochen, um Aoko und Alice zu folgen, welche sich nochmal Toko stellen wollten. How can you live with yourself, Father Ari? Das sagt jetzt Yuika hier. I thought responsible adults guided wayward children. She made no effort to hide her biting disapproval. It was simply her way of showing concern for the boy. Father Ari shrugged.
だから、いろいろと間違えていますよ、シスターユイカ。責任のある大人なんて言葉自体がおかしい。
Er ist kein responsible adult.
何が起きても責任を取る。それが正しい大人というものです。
The rest went unspoken. It didn't matter to him which of them died. With a warm, godly smile, the priest corrected the nun's misunderstanding. Okay, vielleicht hätte ich doch das noch in der letzten Folge zu Ende machen sollen, beziehungsweise können. Egal. Ist jetzt so. Archive. Ein oder maximal zwei fehlen da noch. The empty village in the snow. Day. Ich gehe mal davon aus, dass jetzt das letzte Kapitel kommt, Witch on the Holy Night 2. Starten wir das doch mal. Das heißt, ich muss mir langsam mal überlegen. Eigentlich wäre es klug, Elden Ring hier nach irgendwie noch weiterzubringen, aber ich kam bisher nicht dazu, noch weiter zu grinden. Da muss ich echt noch schauen. The golden 12 ears stood pointed, twitching in response to the sounds around it. Its meal finished, it curled up into a ball in anticipation of nap time, and yawned half from boredom. The old abandoned classroom had fulfilled its purpose many moons ago. For a month, the wolf had spent his time resting on top a heap of disheveled desks. His name was Luf Beowulf. He was a pure-breed werewolf, named after the sun at his birthplace and a hero of legend upon leaving there. It goes without saying that he was not from this country. He came from a land deep within the European wilderness, surrounded by mountains and forests. His homeland was a realm no human had ever set foot in. In the isolated world, forgotten by time, a diminishing race of werewolves lived in peace. This was where Beo first appeared. In a cave on the outskirts of the village, the werewolves found a child bearing the same golden coat as their ancestors. The child was sleeping soundly, as if in his natural habitat. The village welcomed their new member with open arms. 2,000 years after advancing civilization had been cruel to them. As the forests were destroyed, valleys unearthed, and waters polluted, the werewolf birth rate dwindled. They were now facing one birth a decade. The child's golden coat deviating from the typical grey or white and shared only by their ancestors who were treated as gods felt like a sign and their prayers had been answered. A bloodline in atrophy. The werewolves were forced to embrace change. This radiant child, at least temporarily, made them forget about the troubles. Alas, as time passed, their hopes turned to disappointment. The golden wolf was not their salvation. For some reason, Luf, the ray of golden sun, remained a child. Decades passed, and still he did not grow. Forever young, immortal, cursed. He searched the village for his birth mother, but to no avail. He searched the village for someone who understood his plight, but to no avail. Over hundreds of years, he came to realize something. He was different, very different. Neither male nor female, neither strong nor weak. Ignorant of life and death, joy and fear. That thing's a spirit, born of nature. Might look like us werewolves, but don't let that fool you. But the child himself needed to not conjecture to know his own true nature. He was perfect, and therefore he was alone. To the golden wolf, the world was too small. That was why, indeed, that was the very reason. He wanted to know what life was. He wanted to know loss. If he was all-powerful, he wanted to know the mystery behind his all-powerfulness, because as it was, his existence was meaningless. The golden wolf was at a loss, as were the werewolves around him. They revered him, but at the same time wanted nothing to do with him. Luf moved back to the cave he was discovered in, and resigned himself to a life of seclusion.
太陽のルー？ルーガルーじゃなくて？
I thought it was short for Loop Garou.
そりゃ面白い。偶然にしちゃできすぎだ。
And then one day a quirky mage visited the village.
またガタガタとうるさい。トウコさんはあれだよね。
From his place on top of the rubble, Beo peered into the hallway. He thought his fuzzy master was busy dealing with Mizaki City's leylands, but she was engrossed in making traps. 1 month passed since they made the dilapidated building their makeshift workshop. Creating a new trap for intruders became a daily pursuit of Toko.
安全を用意しておくなんて他の生き物は大変だ。
Having been like this since birth, knowing neither infancy nor dotage, he thought differently than others. For he was perfect from the day he was born, never declining, never improving. As such, he had no comprehension of weakness. Childlike, fickle, and without morals, he had no concept of good and bad as either human or wolf. A beautiful creature disconnected from the world around him. He was on top of all other creatures. With one exception, his master, Toko Aozaki. She showed him a sparkling, delicious world, and above all he found her scent refreshing. To him, the world was divided into what was cool and what was not. Your preference in leisure pursuit were of no consequence to him, and he never took gender into account. The only thing that mattered to him was whether a person's life was logical and therefore cool. Toko Aozaki had her faults, but she smelled good.
ベオ、昼食は済ませたか？
Beo's master entered the classroom, presumably done with her traps for the day.
夜が本番だ。それまであまりハメを外すなよ。
Sometimes, like now, she would nag him, but on the whole his master pleased him. In reality, the contract binding her to him was not particularly powerful. If he wanted to, he could tear her to pieces at any time. No human could restrain him. However, he had no intention of killing Toko in exchange for his freedom, and there was a reason for this. In order to move about freely in human society, he needed someone like her. As long as she did not offend him, he had no reason to rock the boat. However,
やっと本番か。待たせすぎだよ、トウコさん。
the promise she had made him in his cave and the reality of the situation had begun to come apart as they seemed.
最高の神秘と戦わせてやる。
He was compliant up to now, but his patience was wearing thin. The fight with the newest magician last night was an enormous letdown.
そう言うな。私も昨日は拍子抜けだったんだから。いいけどね。実はあの子、使わないんじゃなくて、使えないだけじゃないの？
His master's expression turned serious, not in agreement at the wolf's question though, for she had already asked herself the same and many other similar questions.
いや、使うぐらいなら死んだ方がマシなのかもね。そんなバカなことがあるの？使わないと死んじゃう状態だったんだよ。だから そんなバカな考えが成立するぐらい。
That it must be too terrifying to use, Toko finished in her head. She stopped short of voicing it and chuckled at her emotional outburst.
どれほどのものか想像がつかないのは確かだ。だがまあ、根本は変わらないさ。魔法がどのような奇跡神秘の類であれ、魔術師である以上。
With those words, Beo's master walked out of the room, emphasizing that his role in all this was to face Aoko only at that very moment.
魔法ね。
The bored look in his eyes shifted. Ich fand's lustig, dass der eben einmal aufgeleuchtet hat. He recalls the taste of that girl, his long tongue sliding over his chainsaw like fangs. Make no mistake, he would finish his meal. He was the oldest werewolf, the golden god of the forest. For as long as he could remember, no, from the moment he appeared, he had been the most powerful creature of all. All man-made mystiques were trash before him. Magecraft was laughable, and even mystiques, artificial miracles, were futile. Their very existence was an insult to him.
もちろん、そういう契約だし、ちゃんと平らげはするけれど。
That was the extent of the pact. Once he had dealt with the so-called true magic, he was free. His eyes burned with the wolf inside of him, his fanged mouth twisting into a sadistic beastly grin. Ich hatte gedacht, es geht um Alice, aber ist das Aokos Mystik? Kapitel 12, Witch on the Holy Night 2. It was just past 7 p.m. Misaki High School's old building stood silently. While light from the city reached the area, the forest and mountains kept the area hushed. Nothing unusual. Ich gehe davon aus, dass das ist zwar das letzte Kapitel, aber es wird wahrscheinlich noch einen Epilog geben, vermute ich mal. During winter vacation, the old building, now still covered in yesterday's snow, was rarely used. Without signs of life, such unused structures were mere monuments of what once was, nothing more. The old school building would remain that way until the start of the new semester. Behind it, the vast forest grew darker by the minute. If the building had died in just under 2 weeks of vacation, what had become of forest over the years? The wall of overgrown trees filtered out the noise of the city and most of the moonlight. An otherworldly realm had taken root, not even 2 miles away from town. Piercing the cold night air, footsteps crunched through the powdery snow.
この辺りに仕掛けはなさそうね。
Könnte Aokos Mystik diese Gestalt in Rot sein?
それでどうするの？このまま旧校舎に忍び込む？まさか私らがやってきたことなんてとっくにバレてるわ。隠れても意味はないし、何より敵のアジトに入ってどうするのよ。盗みが目的じゃないでしょ、今回は。後ろから切りつけるのは強盗というのじゃなくて
Welche Überraschung.
それができれば苦労はないんだけどね。まあ忍者の真似事は私というかアリスの芸風じゃないでしょ。そもそもやる気満々なのはこっちもあっちも同じってこと。
The sound of the footsteps stopped in unison. The old forgotten Misaki High School building stood before them. What used to be the schoolyard was now a barren snowscape, reclaimed by the forest. The building looked a shell of its former self. The surrounding trees resembled standing mourners at a funeral.
せっかちなお嬢さん方だ。タイムリミットまであと4時間はあるというのに。
Alone in the middle of the white altar was the lone, scarred red mage. As she came out from the forest, Akko lowered herself slightly, scolding at her distant target. Next to Alice stood motionless. The bare branches of the trees cast a long, thorny shadow. Akko was was reminded of Sleeping Beauty, except the smile wasn't nearly as pleasant as the princess in that. Not to mention she wasn't sleeping, and there was no prince. Regardless, the prince came out of her schoolhouse castle to greet their challengers.
その体で無理をして。あなたのそういうところ、姉としてどうかと思うわ。
Toko grinned faintly. Arko fought back the urge to respond. Meanwhile, Alice stood in silence, uninterested in sibling rivalry. Toko stood about 100 feet away, with their senses sharpened, and through magecraft and the silence of the forest they could hear each other perfectly. The golden wolf was nowhere to be seen. Toko faced the two girls alone. Alice's black overcoat and winter hat were typically items for clothing for a mage battle. A few paces in front of her was Aoko, whose combat garb was comparatively out of place in Misaki High School uniform. She had asked Alice to bring a change of clothes, but there must have been some misunderstanding. Though it was a trivial miscommunication, Toko seemed to think it had some special meaning.
ところで、始める前に一ついいかな。気になって仕方がないし、この先機会もないだろうから聞くんだけど、あなたの戦闘服ってそれなの？
Toko spoke clearly, and despite the distance, was able to communicate her deep-seated scorn without trouble. Orko would rather text than engage in small talk, but she decided to take the bait.
そんなわけないでしょ。今までこういう機会が多かっただけよ。数えるなら今日を含めて4回しかないわ。私はまだ現役だからそれも悪くはないかもしれないけど、いつか流行るでしょ、こういうのも。
Orko was sure to emphasize the words. For a split second, Toko's eyes narrowed.
呆れたな。相変わらずのローセンスだ。それはどうも。人形を実の妹に見立てる異常者にそう言われるなら。
With that, the two fell silent and glared at each other. Their bloodlust cut through the thick, cold air like a knife. While the two of them sized each other up, Alice surveyed the area around Toko. There was no indication of anyone or anything was lying in wait near her. Perhaps she should see if the werewolf was still in the school building. Maybe Toko didn't feel like Aoko and Alice were much of a threat in their injured state. Or was she really not expecting a counterattack so early, so the werewolf wasn't ready? After some contemplation, Alice surmised it was the former. She really was going to fight alone. Her arsenal comprised her mystic eyes and rune magecraft. That was more than enough to deal with Orko and Alice in the current state. Alice, all I need is one shot. Orko signaled to Alice behind her with the movement of her finger. Alice had no objections. The original plan was for her to keep the werewolf busy. With the mirror as a backup, Orko was hoping to catch Toko off guard. They had a few other cards up their sleeves, but the fact remained that as mages their attacks wouldn't affect the werewolf. So they decided to ignore it and focus on taking out Toko. Not the best strategy, but it was all the two of them could come up with. But they had been thrown a curveball. Toko had the upper hand, so she was reluctant to use the beast. Orko wasn't about to let this opportunity go to waste. By distracting her with sibling banter, she would settle things before the werewolf even showed up.
じゃあ、今度はこっちの番ね。どう？結界の張り直しは進んでる？まさか、昨日の今日よ。まだ手をつけてもいない。だいたい、私の目的は霊脈の奥にあるもので、結界そのものじゃない。まあ、土地を暴くなんて面倒な真似をするより、お前を暴いた方が早いのかもしれないが。ふん。やっぱりそれが目的だったのね。ならなおのこと。あんたを魔法使いにするわけにはいかないわ。
Orko's blue eyes burned brightly with a fiery fighting spirit. Even though her sister was ready to pounce, Toko remained motionless. But for her mouth, which twisted into a smirk.
魔法使いか。確かにまだ執着はあるね。私には移植されなかった魔術刻印と 青崎の伝える魔法の正体だがもういいよ。惜しくはあるが到達すればどちらも自分で用意できる。それとも今ここで私のために魔法の正体を見せてくれるのかい？
Toko's words came out flatly, but her eyes mocked her sister. It was true, however, that Aoko wanted to defeat Toko. Her best chance would be to use this mysterious true magic. The only problem was that she couldn't. If she could, she would have used it to avoid being mauled last night. Aoko Azaki couldn't use true magic. Toko believed she needed to fulfill some kind of condition. The protection the grandfather placed on the formula was to prohibit miracles from being easily realized. However, that wasn't because he was concerned about the human world. It was no exaggeration to say he would feel nothing if magic leveled the entire city. The truth was, true magic never had any conditions. Aoko was being held back by trauma. These 5 privileges, the only powers of their kind, were bound by cognitive seals. That's why Toko looked down on her naive little sister. So weak, a body incapable of handling magic could be cut down with a mere sword. Aoko knew that better than anyone else, which is why she couldn't forgive her sister's ridicule. Just try using true magic, huh? A pathetic taunt. If that was how she wanted to play, then so be it.
お望みとあらばね。
With a burst of pure rage, Aoko made her move. Her colorless shoes spread feet across the untainted snowfield. Like a stone skipping across the water. As Aoko charged forward, she disappeared. Only her footprints advanced like bullet holes in the snow. Toko held her ground. Concealment was elementary magecraft. More than likely the power came from one of Alice's trinkets. It was a simple yet effective countermeasure to Mystic Eyes. Toko's Mystic Eyes used the lock property to bind an opponent. It did not have the logo's property to discern truth through an illusion. Once a magecraft is working very read, its weakness was exposed. In a mere 4 seconds, her opponent had closed 10 yards and was still speeding up. It appeared that she had given up on mage battle and was going to move in for melee. The other girl, Alice Koanji, didn't take a single step.
アリスから5歩でももらっているのでしょうけど、切り札というものはあくまで自己の力によるものを言う。
Sneering, Toko raised her left arm, holding it out in front of her threateningly. 10 more yards. Unfortunately, her footprints gave away her position. Toko began engraving a rune into the air, but before she couldn't finish, Aoko's footprint stopped. She was still too far away for close combat. What a strange place to enter to attack. No wait, could she really stop so suddenly at that speed? Toko made a snap decision. She quickly raised her outstretched arm towards the sky as saluting the moment. Flames tore through the air. The rune carved into the body above her, bathing it into a pillar of flames. No internal resistance spell could help. Rather than simply burning the targets, the runes wrapped them in a breath of flame. Oh, the Assyrian screamed, falling into the snow-covered ground. In agony, she extended a burning hand out from the hellish fire as if begging for mercy. It was the stuff of nightmares. The snow melted as if the fire burned the attacker alive. Ich sehe da Federn. Chirp, chirp. The movement was far too theatrical to be Aoko. Toko had already turned her gaze to Alice. She hadn't been watching the burning corpse at all. Toko knew it wasn't Aoko from the moment the body fell to the ground. Irritated, Toko glared at Alice, while Aoko had vanished into thin air. She hadn't moved at all. Blue energy traced a circle around where she stood. It was forced to fall. A 4-bar grand magecraft mobilizing her magic crest. Toko only had the single action runes. No, she hadn't mastered anything above 2 bars to begin with. This torrent of energy was too much to handle. The rune formed in the magic circle. The rune of withdrawal was evoked and Aoko's concealment was undone, allowing Toko to utilize her mystic eyes. Within her open pupil, the infinitely mirrored eyes captured their target in an endless hell. But the mage's sight was literally split in two. The space in front of Aoko distorted, obscuring her from like an icy mist. With Toko's eye was like opposing mirrors, then this was like sticking a one-way mirror at the triangulation point. With their vision split in two, she couldn't lock onto Aoko.
御水の鏡の効果よ。アオコは鏡の Y 字路の奥にいる。一本道から見ているあなたに中心は見渡せない。
Alice explained without concern. Due to the help Toko made Alice swallow, she was still unable to use her own magecraft. However, she could use ploys already in motion without using magical energy, such as the mansion's mirror and the aimless little blue bird. Finally, the magic bullet was loaded. Sick. Raising her right arm to reveal her luminescent crest, Aoko took aim at the target 100 feet ahead. Magical energy coursed through her gun barrel arm. From the moment she had received Alice's invisibility, Aoko had begun chanting her magecraft. It took Toko a few seconds to notice. Aoko produced more spins in the awkward awakened magic circles than she had ever done before. She waited, not snap, not draw. Instead, she advanced past her third process. A compression of magic energy, magic blow. If she fired the blue ether that was gathered before, it would fly with the force of 10 tons. Using her magic quest to multiply the energy and machine gun her target, it was enough power to demolish even the old building behind her. Aoko stared intensely at her sister, ready to fire. Toko had no time to counterattack, or even the speed to evade. The fact she didn't move implied she knew that better than anyone. Ich gehe mal davon aus, dass das Beo dazwischen springt. Acceptance filter eyes, not fear. Aoko didn't hesitate. She squeezed the trigger on her right hand. The last word came out like a scream. Under the impact of ether, the surrounding snow melted and flew around. Wusste ich doch. Beo dürfte es gewesen sein. Toko was engulfed in dirt. No way she could survive Aoko's magic bullet. It contained every bit of Aoko's magic energy she could muster. Wearing the curse, Aoko confirmed her victory, and yet somehow she felt bitter. But then, choosing to deal with the torrent of magic energy she swallowed up later, Toko tutted at Aoko's childishness. Her disappointment was so deep it bordered in despair.
学ぶにしては遅すぎたが、まあ聞いておけ青子。切り札というものは先に出した方の負けなんだよ。
Her voice cooled and aloof. She was completely unscathed. The mage stood in the snowfield, not a single speck of dirt on her overcoat. Just before the bullet reached Toko, she reflected a magic energy of the same level. Aoko could only stare at the scene before her. The negation of her magecraft hadn't shocked her though. Leaf-like objects floated behind her sister. Aoko stared like she was living a nightmare. Countless magic crests poured out from Toko's back. It all happened in an instant. The magic bullet approaching like a tsunami. Toko lightly snapped her fingers, causing a stream of letters rush out from behind her. Text became art. Golden flowers bloomed. There must have been hundreds. All sorts of magecraft from even beyond Western Europe. The kind normally carved into the flesh of a mage. The kind Toko Aozaki shouldn't possess. The kind only followers of those schools should know. Blossoming magic crests, brighter than the moon. Incredible in the air. Inscribed in the air, they formed a totem pole, a guardian beast to protect Toko. ich würde sagen, an dem Punkt beende ich mal die Folge. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. Ciao.